The old stand true, if it sounds too good to be true, it is in this market. Because if everybody's blowing it up, then it's probably not going to be what you recommend.
I can appreciate that.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset.
Quick disclaimer that I am not a CPA, attorney, or financial advisor. My thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for education and informational purposes only. My views are from being a successful business owner, entrepreneur, and real estate professional for over 20 years.
I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in.
Hello and welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Today our guest is Cameron Gentile, and his background is a background in Doctor of Chiropractic out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and is also a real estate investor. I'm excited for Cam to join us today. He's a good friend of mine and friend of family. Welcome to the show, Cam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'd first love to open up by tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're working on today, and then we'll jump into real estate investing.
Yeah. Real estate's been an interest. We run a busy practice in just outside of Charlotte, Indian Trail. That's my 9 to 5. That's what we use. It's what I enjoy doing, and we'll keep doing it in some capacity, but my wife and I are branched out into real estate investing, and we're currently analyzing what vertical we want to put into our investment thesis. Where do we want to grow it, and what do we want to change it into?
I love that. And first of all, I love how busy, successful people such as yourself, they do extremely well at their passion, at their business, which is being a doctor, chiropractic for yourself. And then they look at, what do I do? How do I keep reinvesting for myself, for my family, and potentially for future generations? And it seems like real estate tends to be that answer for a lot of people. So here's what I'm excited. Yeah, here's what I'm excited about today. This is going to be a 2-part show, okay? A 2-part episode. Today, we are specifically talking about how to analyze and choose the right short-term real estate investment, short-term rental, I should specifically say. And what I mean by that is many people know the Airbnbs, the VRBOs. That's what Cameron and his wife are, I will call, experts in. And we're going to get excited about learning about that today, because that is something that I don't have a lot of experience with. So part 1 today is really how do we analyze and find the right deal for all of those people that are out there? And then part 2, we'll come back on a different day and talk about the operations and how to manage one of these short-term rentals. So today, as far as analyzing and choosing the right deal, can you take us through, what does that look like for people that are listening to us today? How do you go about finding the right deal, finding the right property? And I think our audience, being real estate savvy, understands that every market's different, right? You can't make a general statement that real estate is the same across the country. It varies from city to city, state to state.
When you analyze a deal, you have to find people that are going to be honest with you to help you. And in the short-term rental market, there are a lot of people trying to sell you stuff. They don't really give you the true perspective of what the markets may or may not be doing. And what you really have to determine off the bat, is this a property you're going to use, or is it solely an investment? And that can drastically change your evaluation. The property we're in, we pivoted to something that we wanted to use. That's within 3 hours of driving distance. It's a great location. So that changed the metrics of what we were willing to accept for an investment. The second thing you have to look at is, what are the local governing rules within the area that you're looking in? Are they short-term rental friendly? Meaning, do they already have taxation for short-term rentals? If they do, the odds of them reversing their laws to make short-term rentals go away or cap them are probably minimalized. They're not going to cut off revenue that's coming into that local municipality. So you need to kind of educate yourself a little bit on how exposed you're going to be. For example, Dallas just announced that short-term rentals are done. So there are people that do rental arbitrage and other forms of short-term rentals that are now either going to have to get grandfathered in, or they're going to have to change and pivot their business model. Atlanta did it last year. It's something that's always moving. So you do have to get up to speed in your local area. If you're looking at something just strictly from an investment purpose and you don't care if you use it or not, the first place to analyze is, where are areas in the country that people are always going to travel to? And kind of the metrics used is 300 to 500 miles is considered a reasonable driving distance for the American vacation. So national parks, major cities that have a lot of attractions. The big one that everybody talks to is Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, because there's very little hotel space as well. So you kind of have to take a global view first and then start drilling down. Once you find an area you want to get into, now you have to look at what are the resources? Can I get cleaners? Can I get a maintenance person? Because odds are you're going to be doing this remote. You're not going to be traveling in and cleaning toilets on every change and getting it flipped. So are there resources to find them? And there's a lot of good places. There's a company called Cherno, and we'll get into this operations, but there's certainly places that you can check to coming in. Once you kind of drill that down, now it's, well, what can I make? How can I find out? And if you've never done this before, that was the daunting part for us. So we're going to buy a property, and we looked in 17 different markets before we decided where we wanted to be. And we found something that really struck us, and we didn't want something for personal use until we found this property. And like I said, we had to pivot a little bit. But there's companies out there like AirDNA. They have a competitor. AirDNA is by far the largest. They're tied directly into Airbnb and VRBO, and they know what that rental revenue is in the area. So they know if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath of X amount of square feet with or without a view, you can expect on the 25, 50, 75, and 90 percentiles what that property can earn within that range. Now, they tie every property in there. So if there's a property that's rented only 10 weeks out of the year, it's in the metrics. If it's a property that's available 52 weeks out of the year, it's in that metrics as well. So you kind of have to take the numbers with a little bit of grain of salt, and you move on from that and say, well, I think I like that number. Am I going to manage it myself? Higher profit margins, better cash flow, more work on you? Or am I going to give up a percentage to a management company? There's pros and cons to both. And you have to determine where we're going to be. There's a lot of metrics in real estate, whether you're talking cap rate or cash on cash return or wherever you want to get into it. But the gold standard for short-term rentals is always cash on cash return. You're trying to build the velocity of money. You're trying to get it moving forward. And typically, most people are looking for a 20% return. And you have to understand what your expenses are. You have to build in a good CapEx, because a lot of these rentals, even if they're turnkey, will break down, and you're going to have to make capital improvements on top of your repairs. And that's getting to work with somebody that can talk to you about the area. And a good realtor that works with short-term rentals will help you, but they're obviously not going to say this is a great deal, buy it. They're not going to be liable, but they could say, hey, look, here's what you can expect for utilities and whatnot. 20% cash on cash return tends to be the standard that most people shoot for. However, in our particular circumstance, we went below that because we knew we were going to use it, and we were okay with that. The hard part in analyzing a deal now is we're coming out of the pandemic, and that was a gold mine for short-term rentals. There's a lot of people that think this is easy. Basically, if you had a bed and a door and it was rentable during the pandemic, you made money. Now we're seeing a reset in a lot of the major markets. A lot of people jumped in thinking they would just go ahead and get a check in the mail and this would be easy, and they're struggling. You're seeing properties coming for sale that are inflated. A lot of these properties are purchased more like a commercial property. They're way over valuation for what they are as a residential or comparable. And you kind of have to factor that in a bit. So you need to be conservative with numbers that are coming off of systems like AirDNA. Cut them down a little bit. Look at numbers for 2018 and 2019. They're a little bit more realistic. We are seeing numbers pretty close to 2017, 2018 in our area. We're in the high country of North Carolina between Boone and Blowing Rock. And a lot of people bought in that area. The good news is for us as operators, a lot of them are not good operators, and they're struggling. They're not filling their books. They're not paying attention to their pricing. They're dropping off. So when you look at your expenses, obviously you have to take in what money am I putting down? How am I going to evaluate the deal from what's my maintenance cost? What is it going to cost to clean it, which can vary wildly, because a lot of cleaners have now realized short-term rentals are pretty good cash cows for them. They charge you a big amount of money. And the downside is places like Airbnb and VRBO are trying to drive those costs down for consumers. So if you have a $400 cleaning fee for a 2-bedroom, you're going to have a struggle with operations. So you want to find out what it is. Most of us use cleaning fees to generate a little bit of extra revenue, kind of build up a cushion for damages, replacements. We mark ours up 25%. And that 25% goes in a little kitty for supplies and everything else. So when you're factoring your cleaning fees, part of it is coming towards a slush fund for just about everybody that operates in this space, and then the rest is going to satisfy your cleaners. So it is a bit of an income generator, but it's also a bit of an expense. Other than that, it's very standard when you pop in your numbers. What is my mortgage expense if you're going to have one, which most people will? What am I doing to cover how I got my money? A lot of people are using HELOCs and pulling equity out, and they're not factoring that second payment. And you need to be very, very cautious, because what interest rates have done for us, our payment on our HELOC has doubled since July of last year. So 11 months, it has gone up quite a bit. So you have to build your buffers in. And that's where people are getting in trouble evaluating these deals. They're going pie in the sky. I'm going to be a 90% property. Even the properties that were in the 90th percentile, they're falling down quite a bit to the 50 percentile and in a structure like AirDNA to figure out what they can come in. But other than that, it's like looking at your household expenses. What's it going to cost for cable, my heating expenses, and everything else? And you're trying to get somewhere close to that 20% cash on cash return.
Yeah. Man, I was taking notes. There's a bunch of things to unpack from what you said. First of all, I find this fascinating. And I know you and I have talked multiple times about, real estate previously. And, I'm in residential. I have residential rentals. I have commercial rentals. And I'm very big into multifamily investing, which I think a lot of our listeners are curious about as well. Finding the right people that can be honest with you. And I think you were referring that to brokers. I think that is across the bar, for realtors, for brokers, for bankers, for people they invest with. The rule of thumb that we use as starting point is, invest with someone that trust, and respect. So I think that comes down to, finding that right person, that is going to nurture the proper leads to feed them to you, to find that right opportunity. I think is crucial. It sounds like you did find that person. I know you were looking for a good while before you found that last property. Let's talk about local rules. That's very interesting to me, and that does make sense. I think that's important for people to realize, that you shouldn't just assume that every property is legally allowed and zoned to be a rental property, let alone a short-term rental. So that's a very interesting discovery that I think most people need to be aware of. So obviously you did your due diligence, it sounds like, and looked into those rules in advance.
Yeah, you have to, you're not only looking at local municipalities. If you take our little area of, say, Boone, North Carolina, in the city of Boone, they have a very archaic anti-brothel law that for certain rentals, you can only have X amount of people in them, otherwise you're in violation. And I believe it's 3 people, if I remember correctly, which is interesting because you have a very large campus there. So it makes off-campus housing difficult for a lot of those people. You then have to go out to your county moving through. Outside of Boone proper, no restrictions whatsoever. In fact, they even have taxation in place to be able to collect money outside of Boone proper. You also have to look at your HOAs. So the neighborhood next to us, even though we are out in the middle of the woods, we are still part of a neighborhood. The one right next door just changed their rules. 57 houses, no short-term rentals, no grandfathering in, and there's 10 short-term rentals in there. They are now out of business. And HOAs can be a blessing and a curse in the short-term rental market, just like they can in any real estate market.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with condos and you have your condo fees, there's my maintenance fees. I'm taken care of. I know what that fixed number is going to be from an HOA standpoint. But you're also at the mercy of them if they decide to change their rules because they don't like renters coming in, especially short-term renters. People having fun. Sometimes there's alcohol involved. Sometimes there's damages. You can't control who all of your guests are. You can just do your best judgment on the platform. And HOAs can play a huge role in helping you or actually putting you out of business, which can happen as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I have a townhome in South Charlotte that is in a residential area. And thankfully I bought it long enough ago that I got grandfathered in because the HOA changed the rules to only allowing 20% of the properties to be rental properties. Now I don't do short term. I do longer term leases, either a 1 or a 2 year basis, but that is something definitely to investigate and do your due diligence on those HOAs. I think that's a great idea. All right, so the other note that I took, AirDNA. I love that. What a great tip and trick for people to hear. Haven't heard of that one before. So that'll give you the analytics to make sure you're choosing the right place and able to charge the proper rates / revenue to be able to cash flow the property. I think that's brilliant.
They'll definitely give you an idea. They'll ballpark you for sure. You have to go buy a territory. So when we were looking, we did not go buy 17 territories, and, $100 to $150 per territory. Once we narrowed down to kind of where we wanted to be, we purchased 5 territories and really dug into it. And what was helpful is if it was an existing Airbnb, we could go find it on AirDNA and see how it did. So we could actually
can see rental comps.
So we used it as a means to fact check the seller because they were full-time and what they were using to make sure the numbers we were getting were or at least legitimate.
Love it. Okay. What are some red flags that, listeners should be on the lookout for whenever they're evaluating short-term rental properties?
You have to look to see if there's a management company in place, because it can make your transition difficult, because a lot of times the sellers will have a contract they have to honor on sale, and you might be bound for 30, 60, 90 days of advanced bookings from your purchase date to use their pricing structure and still pay them out. There are ways around it, but that's one red flag right away, is that they're using a management company. Conversely, it's also a good value add. If you're going to self-manage and you're going to get a 40% kick by not having to pay that out, you want to investigate how much of a red flag that's going to be. The old stand true, if it sounds too good to be true, it is in this market, because if everybody's blowing it up, then it's probably not going to be what you recommend.
I can appreciate that.
You really have to look at, is this an existing rental, or is this an existing home that has no rental history? Once you start breaking that out a little bit, buying an existing rental structure tends to be difficult, because the platforms don't help you transfer anybody. So you're going to be stepping into an existing rental, looking at their numbers. And if you don't work out the transition well, and you don't have that ironed out in your contract, you could be in the hole pretty quickly and having a property that's already red flagged. Aside from that, it's a normal house buying red flags. Get an inspection, don't forego it. Make sure your septic tanks and everything else are inspected on rentals, because that's where people cut corners. And the last thing you want to do is buy a property and have a sewage backup, which happened to a guy a mile down the road from us. He purchased it, great property, didn't do his due diligence, got flooded out in his first review. It was a 1 out of 5 with sewage backup in his entire first floor. So not really the way you want to start your business. Aside from that, it's typical rental or real estate red flags. Nothing too extraordinary.
All right, one last question for you before we wrap up episode 1, if you don't mind. So I love the closing line of, hey, can you tell me your highs and your lows and what you've learned along your real estate journey thus far in your life?
Sure. The highs were actually having good conversations with my wife and changing her mindset on leverage. That was a really awesome growth point for her to kind of come from. She comes from the school of debt is bad. You can't have any of it. So for us as a couple to work through my ability to not worry about risk as much as the average person, to her being, I can't even have anything on a credit card month to month, which you shouldn't, but all the same, that was a pretty good high. That really helped us grow as a couple. Our lows of lows are probably a stress point with short-term rentals, are chasing the review and understanding it's okay if not everybody's a 5-star, because you're not going to make everybody happy. And dealing with people that may understand the system to try to get refunds. And once you work through that, it's not that bad. But in the beginning, being very green, no matter how much homework we did, it is a customer service business. And boy, we beat ourselves up pretty good until we figured out it's the game within the game. Okay, now we know what's going on.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, Cameron, thank you so much for jumping on today. I know people that are listening will get a lot of value. I myself, I've learned a bunch. Again, I've never done a short-term rental or owned one in my life. I think the Air DNA itself was an amazing tip and trick I had never heard about before. And definitely researching the local rules and the HOAs, making sure the zoning is in place. I think those are great takeaways from today that everybody should know. If the audience wants to connect with you or hear more about what you're up to, or even lives in Charlotte and needs to stop by your practice sometime, what's the best way for them to connect?
For us on the real estate end, we have upandawayproperties@gmail.com. Easiest way to get a hold of me for that. On LinkedIn, Cameron Gentile, I'm the only one there, super easy to find. And be happy to chat with anybody who'd like to talk.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time, Cameron. I really appreciate it. Love everything that you were able to give and discuss with us today. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.